If we look at the trend line when it comes to reducing and preventing fatal and serious injury crashes, where we see significant drops in that trend line, typically that has also been paired with significant legislation that has been passed in our state. Think the .08 alcohol level for DWI laws, or for DWI violations. Think of the primary seatbelt law and the successes that we realized after that. Today, we are also going to celebrate what I look at as the next milestone in traffic safety legislation in Minnesota, and that's the hands-free law that was signed into law by Governor Walz and went into effect on August 1st. There's one The beauty of the law is its simplicity. It's simple for drivers to understand. You can't have that electronic device in your hand at all. And it's simple for law enforcement to enforce because you no longer have to have that roadside debate about what somebody was doing on that phone. Just seeing it in their hand, that constitutes the violation. And so it's significant in its simplicity, and it will make a difference on our roads. Many of you have probably heard me say the statistics before, but in the states that had hands-free prior to Minnesota, they averaged a 15% reduction in their fatalities. If Minnesota can just be average, and we all know Minnesota is above average, right? And so we will exceed that 15%, but it's going to take us some time to get there. Anecdotally, we are seeing more and more people making good decisions when it comes to those electronic devices, but we still have a lot of work that law enforcement is finding out there. We all have that one mission when it comes to this type of law, and that's to keep the roads safe for everyone in Minnesota. But we also know that for every distracted driving statistic, there is an unfinished story behind that statistic. And that unfinished story belongs to the person who was killed and to their families. Please turn your attention to the screens and watch the story of Joe Tucholsky.
I was married to Joe for 53 years. He was 79 years old when he died. My husband died on October 28th, 2015. Joe was going to the mailbox that day to get the newspaper like he always did. And then there was a knock on my door, and the sheriff, who I know well, was there. And he said Joe was in an accident and he died. And he was hit on the side of the road by a distracted driver who had been texting. I still have days where I can't really believe that he's gone. I'm to spend the final years of my life alone, and that's what hurts me most. I always had plans and things that he and I would do as we aged together, and now I've had to change that plan completely. Now it's a solo act. Joe was a wonderful family man. He cared about his family first and foremost. Joe and I had 7 grandchildren, and they all miss Grandpa like I do. He was a farmer probably since he was 7 years old. He was a school bus driver for 30-some years, and he absolutely loved it. What could have been, what might have been, will not be now. I think the hands-free law being passed is absolutely wonderful. It'll count for many deaths that won't have to happen. My life changed in a moment, and it can happen to anyone.
Tough stuff, but that's why we're here. I'd like to now invite Joe's son, Greg, up on stage to share some thoughts about the hands-free law and what it took to get that across the finish line.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. To prepare for this, I did a little research on the history and mission of Towards Zero Death and realized I've taken the initiatives of the organization for granted. Having driven on Minnesota's roads for nearly 40 years, I've seen many changes to make our roads safer. Excuse me, I wasn't ready for that video, I got to be honest. I've seen many changes on our roads to make them safer, and after my brief research, I realized that many of these changes can be attributed to the work of Towards Zero Death since its inception in 2003. Brian, I'm not an engineer. I'm a social studies teacher. But even I can appreciate your statistics showing how many lives have been saved since 2003. My family's efforts to help make Minnesota's roads safer began on October 28, 2015. That's the day my father, Joe, was struck and killed by a driver who was responding to a text. He was walking alongside a rural road in front of his house to get his morning paper. According to the police report, the driver said before she hit send, she hit a yellow blur. That yellow blur was my dad, wearing his yellow school bus driver's jacket. The tragic and violent way he died is still all too common on our roads. We couldn't allow the final image of my dad to be that of his body lying lifeless beneath a blanket in a ditch. His story couldn't end like that. His death had to serve a greater purpose. We're just one of thousands of families who have the same tragic story to tell, and among many families who took action by testifying in the Minnesota State Legislature to enact a hands-free law. Several of those families are here today. On April 12, 2019, our group was part of an intensely personal triumph as we witnessed Governor Walz sign the hands-free bill into law. It was a struggle. We thank the lawmakers, Representatives Hornstein and Uglum, and Senators Carlson and Newman, for negotiating this bill through the legislature. Colonel Matt Langer's testimony was invaluable, and Paul Austin with the Minnesota Safety Council was responsible for organizing a passionate group of Minnesotans who demanded change in honor of their lost loved ones. The Department of Public Safety's dedication to keeping the message alive was critical to the passage of this bill. And we love this bumper sticker. We just picked one up this morning. We don't do bumper stickers on our car, but this one is going on there. We realize preventable deaths will still occur on our roadways, and hands-free is not distraction-free. We're confident Minnesota will continue to witness a reduction in deaths on our highways because of your work and the hands-free law. I look forward to the day when driving with a phone in the hand will carry the same stigma as driving with a beer in your hand. Hands-free is an important step toward changing the behaviors on our roads. On behalf of those who have lost loved ones on a Minnesota roadway, thank you for your continual efforts to make our roads safer, and know that our loved ones are smiling down upon you. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing what is an intensely personal story and experience. As Greg mentioned, in addition to the Tucholskys, there are so many families and traffic safety partners that were behind the effort to get this hands-free law through the legislature and onto the governor's desk. Many of them are with us today. Running the risk of forgetting somebody, there are a few that I really do want to call out and recognize. The Minnesota Safety Council, Paul Hassan, great job helping to coordinate so many of the efforts that took place during not only the last session, but the session before and the session before. The Minnesota Trucking Association went all in on this. Their members see this stuff firsthand every day, and their support was absolutely key. The Insurance Federation of Minnesota was also key to making sure that this legislation got the hearings that it deserved. There were over 40 other community and business organizations that signed up and stood behind this bill and helped to get it through this legislative process. I'd also like a personal thank you to Colonel Langer, who was absolutely instrumental in helping to craft the language and to make sure that the law that was finally enacted was one that was effective and easy for law enforcement to use. As I mentioned earlier, today is a celebration, and we want to celebrate and thank and recognize those who made this law happen. Together, they tirelessly worked with state lawmakers to get the hands-free bill passed and signed into law by Governor Walz. As we get ready to announce the Distinguished Public Leadership Award winners, I'd like to ask the families and the traffic safety partners who helped us get this law passed to join me and the Tukalskis up on stage. Please come on up. This is a representation of the overall group that really was there day after day, hearing after hearing, and session after session that helped to make sure that this legislation came into being. We're going to recognize some of the key players today that really worked within the legislative body itself to make sure that the law was passed and sent on to Governor Walz. The Distinguished Public Leadership Award was established to recognize public leaders who, through their vision, leadership, and knowledge, have influenced traffic safety policy directions and decisions that benefit society and make Minnesota a safer place to be. Today, it is my distinct honor to present the Distinguished Public Leadership Award to Senator Jim Carlson, Senator Scott Newman, Representative Frank Hornstein, and retired State Representative Mark Uglum. Several of our recipients had scheduling conflicts and were not able to be here today, but they will be represented. So with that, I would like to pass out the awards. Right behind us here. Please join me in thanking these lawmakers and these families and these advocates who made this law happen. I'd like to now give each of the recipients or their representative a chance to make a few remarks.
Oh, this is a profound experience for me. I'm Jim Carlson. I'm a state senator, and I represent Egan and Burnsville. And I've been working on this bill for a long time. It was 10 years ago that I first signed on to it, and I've carried it each session since then. And I really have to thank my compatriots who have worked hard as well to get this to a vote and finally get it passed. And I think I have to say this is probably the accomplishment of my career. So thank you all for coming here, and thank you so much for the recognition. The families are the ones that got this passed. The people behind me are the ones that, you know, every time I got a little bit frustrated, they gave me new motivation and new mobilization. So thank them and thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm a former retired Representative Mark Uglum, and it's very nice to be addressing all of you this morning. Probably the safest room in the entire state of Minnesota. This bill, as Senator Carlson mentioned, was a very, very difficult bill to get passed. But if it hadn't been for all the advocates and the numerous committee hearings that we had, and I was in the House, the original House bill was authored by me. If it hadn't been for industry, law enforcement, the advocates, and everybody else that's been mentioned before, this wouldn't have been done. It's an incredible accomplishment, and I think as a legislator, I'm very proud to say that finally the system did work. Sometimes the system takes a long time to churn out the right bill for the right time, for the right people, but we did. And this was a bipartisan bill. Senator Carlson is a Democrat, Representative Hornstein is a Democrat, I'm a Republican. But we realized that this was not a party issue. This was a safety issue, this was a saving lives issue. And if you had been in some of these committee hearings, listening to the stories of our advocates, there wasn't a dry eye in any committee hearing that we went to. But still, we had opposition. And in my mind, it was opposition that shouldn't have happened, but it did. We got it passed. And I, for one, and Senator Carlson mentioned it, it's a crowning achievement. But we're all here this morning because we all have an interest in safety, saving lives. And every night when I go to bed, I realize that we've done something very, very profound for this state. And I can sleep a little better at night knowing that we have hands-free. And I hope that we will continue to enforce this law, maybe tweak this law, maybe increase some of the penalties, and get the job done and save lives on the roads. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm former Representative Larry Hosch, and I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of Representative Frank Hornstein. I served a district not too far from here for 8 years with Representative Hornstein, and I know that the good work that he does and all of our honorees do is merely them being the conduit for your advocacy and your work and your stories. So thank you for all that you've done to be able to make this happen. It is my honor to be here today. Representative Hornstein, I know you have a continued partner with Representative Hornstein and you continued work towards zero deaths, and thank you for the appreciation.
Thank you, everybody. And if you want to regain your seats, that would be fine. Hands-free is yet another milestone for traffic safety in Minnesota. And we celebrate the victory, we celebrate the passage, and we celebrate the lives that will be saved because of that law. But we can't rest on our laurels. We need to find the next solution, and the next solution, and the next solution. And it's through grassroots citizens' efforts, like the one that we saw that came into play that pushed hands-free across the finish line, that are going to be key to that. This is why TZD works so well in Minnesota, because of all of you out there who are involved with this program at the grassroots level. This is not something that's operated at the state level. We simply are here to support what you do and to provide the resources that you need to save lives in your communities. We have a big Minnesota, but we have a one Minnesota. And one solution may work in one part of the state, and it may need to be tweaked or changed to work in another part of the state. And we're all about that. That's where we need to grasp that innovation and that change and thinking outside the box and finding those new ideas that we all need to keep us going in the right direction toward zero deaths. For those of you who haven't heard, I really encourage all of you to join us for the noon awards luncheon. We are extremely honored this year, and Governor Walz will be attending and will be providing some remarks and will be helping with the award ceremony. It's really a significant honor for us to be able to host the governor of the state of Minnesota at our event this year. Thank you, everybody, and have a great conference. We'll see you here at noon.